Welcome, everybody, to our Facebook Live today. Also going out to Instagram. Thanks for tuning in. If you're out there, I'm Diane Ray, the co-founder of MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network. And we're doing another Meet the Podcasters today. So Tina and I have been putting these together and introducing you to some of our podcasters. If you haven't checked out the amazing lineup that we have on the network, and you're into this kind of content, you know who you are, you definitely have to head over there and see who we've got. So we're taking the opportunity to bring people on, find out what they're about, find out about their podcast. And if you're already listening, great. If you're a fan of their podcast, if not, tell your friends. We're trying to get new people and new listeners to check out our amazing podcasters. So today I'm really excited because my guest today is Laura Wooster. And I first heard about Laura from one of the authors and also a friend that I used to work with at Hay House, John Holland, who's an incredible spiritual medium. And John said, you got to talk to Laura. She wants to do a podcast and I'm going to hook you guys up. So he did. And Laura's been the host of the Intuitive Life podcast. And it's been such a pleasure and a treat to watch this podcast grow and to see her grow as a host and all of the amazing people that she talks to and all of the great topics that she shares on the podcast. So I wanted to have her on so we could chat a little bit about it. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Diane. Thanks for having me tonight.
I'm so glad that you could pop on and just chat with people about the podcast.
Oh, of course. Anytime. I always love chatting with you, Diane.
Well, I love the name of the show, first of all, The Intuitive Life. And one of the things that you like to do on the podcast is to help people to embrace their own intuitive gifts. And that's something that you work with your clients, right? And then you also like to talk about or talk to people about it on the podcast. So how did that come together? Did John kind of nudge you to do the podcast, John Holland?
He did. I was doing a podcast probably like 12 years ago too, like back when it was called radio, right? But now it's podcast. So I did it for several years and I kind of backed away from it. And then he finally said, you know what? Because we should get you hooked up with Diane. Like she's got this thing going on. I'm like, I know who Diane is. I used to listen to her all the time when you worked with Wayne Dyer and everybody. So I always enjoy listening to you. So that's how we got connected. But yeah, so the reason how I came up with the Intuitive Life is one of the things I love to do with my clients is to affirm for them when they are connected intuitively and to let them know that they can listen to their own guidance, that they don't have to talk to people like me all the time to really know what to do with life. And I often say, it's like, wouldn't it be great? It sounds kind of counterintuitive in a sense, but wouldn't it be great at some point where people wouldn't need to talk to psychics or mediums, that they can do these connections themselves?
Well, maybe we'll evolve to that in the future. You know, people always talk about where we're going as a society, as human beings. You know, maybe we'll kind of grow into and really embrace our intuitive gifts, you know, at some point in the future. But I mean, how did you become aware of your own intuitive gifts?
Well, I was always very sensitive as a child. And I had some experiences that, you know, as I grew up, I started thinking that was more like childhood imagination. I didn't think it was real. And then around the time that I became a mom, especially with my second child, I started hearing, there was some circumstances that transpired. It's kind of a longer story, but some circumstances through that I started hearing spirit talk to me. So people on the other side. And being someone who I didn't want to fully accept that this was what was happening when it was first happening. I started getting really inquisitive about, okay, either I need extra help or I need to figure out, is that this is something that I need to learn more about. So through taking classes and reading books and listening to podcasts and things like that, and learning as much as I possibly could, I finally came to embrace that there was a connection to spirit, and also my own intuition, and recognizing I hadn't been listening to my own intuition. And when I started to embrace it, things started to happen in a different way, in a more vibrant and healthy way as well.
Well, what's so great about your show that I really love on the podcast is that you still bring in that live element, like it's a live radio show, and people can talk to you. You know, they can get like a mini reading or get a reading or ask a question. And So the way you do that is you kind of put out an invite through your social media that you're going to do a taping, and then people just join the show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if anybody is like on my email list or if they follow me on social media, then I put these things out and I can invite people in to essentially be a live audience for my guests or myself. And we take questions and we do readings, and it's a lot of fun.
The live studio audience on a podcast. I
Yeah.
love that. So when you're, reading for someone either on the podcast or in a private setting, as a private client, I mean, how do you interpret it or interpret the messages from spirit? I know some mediums may get a picture in their mind or a scent or something like that. How do you know for sure that you've made that connection with spirit when you're sharing a message with someone?
Well, the our psychic senses are the same senses that I would use whether I'm connecting with you psychically, maybe doing a psychic reading, or connecting with someone in spirit. The difference is that it feels different to me. I know I can tell by the way the connection feels that it's someone from spirit communicating versus connecting to someone psychically. But it's similar things that come through, images. I might hear things. It's a lot of sense of feeling and claircognizance, and just a combination of senses that all come together to paint a picture. And so it's different. It's like learning a new language constantly, because every communicator on the other side has their own way of communicating, and I'm always learning new ways of communicating. And I have people who speak a different language, maybe experience life in a very different way than I have, and it's like, wow, that's fascinating. I get to experience these things through spirit that I wouldn't experience or haven't experienced in life. And so it's always an evolving language, which is to me very fascinating. I'm always learning something.
So would you say you're an evidential medium? Like you'll get something that is so confirming or, is undeniable to the person that's sitting for the reading that
Mhm.
they'll just be blown away.
Exactly. Like information comes through to validate who they are, what their personality was like, what they would normally say to their loved ones. A lot of times they'll come through and someone will say, "My dad would always tell me that." And isn't it interesting that he came through with that? And it's like, yeah. So the way that they communicate with their loved one, the way what they did in life, and all these bits of information that validates that this person is who they are.
One of the other things that I love that you do on the podcast is that you like to bring on other psychics or other mediums or other people working in this world. And it's kind of cool to hear two mediums talking about the biz, like sharing what they experience and,
Yeah.
different readings that they've had. So
Mhm.
is that something that you like to do on the show? That it's got to be
I
fun for
do.
you to talk to other people in the business.
I do, because I think we kind of get beyond when we talk to another medium or two mediums talking together, we get beyond the usual questions that happen in a podcast with a medium where, do you think this is real? What makes you think that you're actually a medium? All these things that, the general public would probably ask a medium, that there's sort of a sense of skepticism that's there. But when I have someone coming on who we both know we're mediums and we just talk about it as very matter of fact, this is just normal for us, and I really believe, it is normal. It's perfectly normal. And also I like to, the people I bring on, maybe the things we do is not quite normal or common, but we're normal people. And I just like to show that to people that we're normal human beings. We just happen to talk to people we can't see. And also it just happens to be that this is something we spend a lot of time to learn about and to understand so that we could do it in a clear and concise and helpful way. So,
So you don't have a cauldron at home or a witch hat, or anything like that, you know.
well,
Maybe you do have a cauldron. I don't know.
I have a pillow over here that's embroidered that says, "I love being witchy." So I do have my witch side.
Your witchy things.
Yeah, I
One of
do.
the guests that you used to have on a lot was a tarot card master, and I
Okay.
believe her name was Ann Hens, and I think she's no longer with us,
Oh,
unfortunately. Is that
oh,
true?
no, she is. Yeah, she is. I just haven't had
Okay.
her on in a while. I need to have her back on.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Well,
yeah,
Anne, if you're listening, I don't want you to think that we think that you're not with us, but
she's
there
here.
was someone that I know you were close with that had passed that was in this realm. And
Oh,
maybe I got
Janet, probably Janet New Habit.
that's it. Yeah, there was another medium. Somehow I got her and Anne mixed up. But I wanted to ask you about the tarot cards. That's why I mentioned Anne Hens. So
Oh,
do
sure.
you like to use different tools like that?
I do.
Cards or a pendulum or something like that?
I do. I have all those things. I have pendulums. I have so many different tools. I rarely use them anymore. I have oracle cards that I'll pull out from time to time, but initially, when I first started really trying to understand all of this, I was using cards a lot. And I found that I was using them as a crutch a lot of times. Tools are great, but sometimes when we rely upon them too much, then we're not really paying attention to our own inner power or inner connection to energy to the world. So I just had to wean myself off of that, and things got so much clearer and stronger. And it built my confidence to step away from those tools. Not that I don't use them, but I prefer not to nowadays. So
That's interesting. I've heard another medium and a psychic where someone would always want them to read the cards, and then she said, "No, you can only have a reading maybe once or twice a year." Like people would get dependent on it, like you were saying, and not really trust your own guidance, and just kind of look towards the cards. Did you find
yeah,
that happening?
yes, a lot. All the people I've had people come in like every month or so, and that you can't come in every month and talk to me. And it's what we end up building on, rather than constantly giving them cards to lead their life, is to find ways to let them trust their own sense of what's right for them and what's not, rather than relying on someone pulling cards for them to tell them what to do. So I think that when anytime someone does that consistently all the time, it's an indication they just don't trust their own sense of what's right for them, and they want someone to tell them what to do. So they tend to have a lot of anxiety. So I have to
Yeah.
find ways. I instead of doing that, I give them tools, and I offer them tools and some insight about how can we manage your anxiety more? How can we have you trust your gut more? So that you don't have to rely on me anymore. Or maybe you can come once a year, check in. That's totally cool, but not every month.
Right, cut them off at some point.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
become too dependent. But you have
exactly.
so many great guests, and people on the podcast and so much, great information that you share. It's so helpful. You also had a really cool astrologer on recently, and I know I've heard her on a couple of times. So how do you use astrology, just either personally or in your readings with people? Is that a tool you like to use?
I love Dorothy Morgan is the astrologer I have on a lot, and she's wonderful. And I know like this much about astrology, and I always say that I'm like I learn a little bit every time she comes on, but I'm really not. I don't have an astrology kind of mind. However, this is the weird thing is that she is validated for me several times like that. I can tune into the energy behind what would show up in an astrology chart, but I don't know how to read a chart. So we kind of looking at the two sides of the same coin. But for my astrology, I always talk to her, say, okay, where for me, if I might look into like what can I expect this year? How can I best use the energy that's available to me this year? And what can I expect? And it's not so much controlling life; it's just kind of understanding. It's like knowing the weather report before stepping on a boat. You want to know what you're dealing with before you do that, and then just trim the sails the best you can in order to get through it in a helpful way, in a healthy way at the same time. So that's how I see astrology at. It's more of it's a tool to help guide us, but not to direct us necessarily.
Right. No, I love astrology too, and I love reading, what's going to be happening or what's going on in the skies. And I'm so interested lately because we're having this really amazing like 7 planet alignment thing that's going on in the sky. And
Yeah.
lately Venus has been really bright. So
Uh-huh.
I don't know how that's showing up in people's charts or anything like that, but I think it's so
That's our
interesting to
Dorothy.
have. Maybe you can ask Dorothy, the next time
I'm gonna have
when
her
you
on
when you
again.
have her on. Yeah. And you
Yeah.
also have people, that call and ask questions that have lost a loved one and they're dealing with grief. And I think mediumship can be such a great tool to work with people on that, when they're grieving or just, lost a loved one and they're not sure how to handle those feelings. I mean, what do you like to tell people about what you know about the other side that can kind of lessen their fears?
Well, the thing is, one of the most important thing is that we can still heal from the other side. That some people are so distraught because there were things that weren't addressed with their loved one, or they felt they didn't have the closure before their loved one left the physical earth. It could have been, personality conflicts or not seeing, for whatever reason. But one of the things that people realize a lot when they do have a mediumistic reading is that that healing can continue even though their loved one is not in the physical world anymore. That actually sometimes healing can only continue because someone might be more receptive from the other side, because that personality of maybe being not receptive to compromise or for listening to someone else's side, they actually are more open from the other side. So healing can happen even after. So so that's one aspect of it. And the other thing too is when someone has a reading, then they know their loved one is still around, because a lot of times they'll come through with information to show that they still see what's going on. So then the person who's still here can then know that they can talk to them, they can listen, it's just another way of communicating with them. And then they're still here to take part in our life. They're not missing anything.
That's so beautiful, and I think it is so comforting. Hi, Nina. I just want to say hi to Nina and Mooney, two people that have popped in our
Oh,
Facebook
yeah.
chat here. And it is comforting to know that, we can have that healing. And I was always so interested when I would see John do mediumship demonstrations at the big Hay House events. And the thing that people would always ask is my loved one okay? Is so-and-so okay on the other side? And there was so much worry that
Yeah.
for some reason they wouldn't be. And what would you tell people that ask that question? Are they okay?
I would say exactly the same thing that John says, that I'm paraphrasing what he says. Yeah, they're okay. We're not. That's just the
Right.
joke that he says. Yes, they're absolutely okay. They're not missing anything. They're afraid that they're going to miss, the life that they would have had here. But I really feel like they experience life in a way from the other side. They're not missing anything, and they really are okay. They're protected. They've got their soul groups with them. They've got their guides with them. They got so much that it goes beyond. I mean, obviously, we won't know what this is going to be until we get there. We really don't really know for sure what this is like.
Right.
But, when you talk to people like Anita Mojani or people like that who've been on the other side, it's all love. And the physical confines of this world, of this earth, is not like it is over there. There's so much more possible over there. Like we put a human context on what we think the spirit world is like, and it's well beyond what we can comprehend from this side. So I really believe that we're really safe and okay. And that's the only message I've ever received from anybody on the other side, is that they're okay and healthy and happy.
Right. And they're feeling, the pain is gone from whatever they may have experienced in
Yeah.
this life. And they're
Yeah.
there, they're pain-free, just
Mhm.
feeling happy and beautiful and love, just feeling that all encompassing love. So
Yeah.
I find that comforting. Also, I had read, David Kessler.
Yes, I've
You
met
may
him
have,
once.
yeah,
Mhm.
he was a Hay House author too, and he's talked to
Mhm.
a lot of people about grief, and he would say that people come to you at that moment of transition. Like he interviewed hospice workers and different people, that you're never alone at that moment because
No.
they help you. Have you found that to be true also?
Oh my gosh, I had that experience with my dad. He passed a year ago in November, and a couple of days before he crossed, I had a feeling that he might be passing. I know the medical team was kind of painting the picture that he was going to be okay. We're going to take this step by step, but I just had a feeling that this might be it, and I think he knew it too. And at one point, we were in the room with him, and he pointed and he said, "My mother's here." And it was just so matter of fact, like, she's here. And I'm like, I believe you. I really believe that you're here. And there was another incident as well where about 24 hours before he crossed, he saw her as well. So I kind of knew when he started seeing somebody in his room that this is what was going to happen. So nobody ever goes home alone, nobody. And there's always somebody there to call them home and to let them know they're okay. And there's no fear.
That to me is the most comforting thought, that you're not alone. And even
Mhm.
if you may not be able to be at the bedside of someone, what if they're in another state or something, and people have so much guilt that they weren't able to be there. That's the one thing I think that is a comforting thought to me, that, well, they weren't alone at that
Yeah.
moment. Maybe physically they were, but someone or several people, sometimes it can be a crowded room from what
Yeah.
I've heard, that
Oh,
can
yeah.
help them over. So I think that's very comforting. But I love what you're doing on the podcast and sharing this information with people. And even though they might be skeptical at first, once they start learning all of these things, and I think you're just bringing so much healing and love and support to all of the listeners out there. So do you have any cool guests coming up on the podcast that you could share, maybe a sneak peek?
I have one. I just recorded one last week, but I'm almost afraid to say just yet because I haven't edited yet. But I've got a really cool, very different, not a medium, but someone who is here to really have people embrace who they are and to be okay with who they are, no matter how the world accepts you. And that's one thing I love that message. And I think that's something that's needed so much more now than ever, is
Yes.
knowing that you are okay as you are, and that there are allies and people who, even if they're not exactly like you, that we have your back. And so that's one of the things, and that goes for anybody who feels different, whether you're a medium, super sensitive, just see the world differently, feeling out of pace with the rest of the world. Yes. So that's the message that will be part of that podcast when it comes up.
Oh, I love that. That's so great and so timely too,
Yeah.
for a lot of what we're dealing with these days. Well, I'm
Yes.
so glad you could join us, Laura. And if people aren't following your show, get on your podcast app right now and look up Laura Wooster, The Intuitive Life, and make sure you're listening. People need to hear your voice and what you're teaching and sharing out there. And also, if you love this content, if you're interested in spirituality, contemporary spirituality, mediumship, tarot, angels, health, wellness, all of that, join Laura and all the other amazing podcasters that we have on the mindbodyspirit.fm podcast network. And hopefully we'll be able to chat again very soon, Laura. And
Yeah.
thanks. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.